Welcome to PPC Cement's tutorial on how to lay a concrete pathway. A well-constructed concrete pathway will not require maintenance and will enhance any home entrance or garden. In this tutorial, you will be guided to construct an unreinforced concrete pathway. A list of tools required: builder's bucket, wheelbarrow, shovel, builder's line, 150mm steel pegs, rigid timber forms, flexible forms, stiff bristled brush or broom, straight edge, spirit level, tape measure, wood float, edging tool. Materials required: PPC sure build cement, 19mm stone, clean concrete sand, and polythene sheeting. Preparation: plan the track and width of the pathway and mark the outline with the steel pegs and builder's line or dry sand. Be creative by using curved sections instead of sharp turns or corners. Excavate the area between the outlines to a depth of approximately 150mm. Formwork: although the excavated edge can be used to contain the concrete, it is recommended that formwork be used to produce a neat edge. Place the longitudinal forms on edge and support the forms at about 1 meter intervals with 150mm steel pegs driven into the ground. Curved sections can be formed using the 3mm thick masonite supported in the same manner. Apply formwork oil to the forms to prevent the concrete sticking to the forms. Use the straight edge and spirit level to check crossfall and longitudinal levels. Ordering the materials: measure the depth, width, and length of the pathway with the tape measure. Use these measurements to calculate the volume of concrete required. To do this, either use the PPC Builders app or multiply the total length, width, and depth in meters to obtain the volume of concrete in cubic meters. As a guide, 1 bag of sure-build cement mixed with 2 wheelbarrows clean concrete sand, 2.5 wheelbarrows of 19mm stone, and water will yield approximately 220 liters or 0.22 cubic meters. Decide on the casting sequence and joint locations. If you wish to place the concrete in alternate panels, install transverse forms between the longitudinal forms at intervals not greater than 1.5 times the width of the pathway. With this method, you can cast panels 1, 3, 5, and so on the first day. On the second day, you will remove the transverse forms and cast the infill panel numbers 2, 4, 6, and so on. If you wish to cast the pathway in a continuous strip on one day, groove joints should be installed at equidistant centers not exceeding 1.5 times the width of the pathway. Mixing the concrete. Mixing can be done by machine or by hand in a wheelbarrow or on a concrete floor or other smooth, clean surface. Mix 1 part PPC sure build cement with 4 parts clean concrete sand and 5 parts 19mm stone with sufficient clean water to produce a workable concrete which is easy to compact. Excess water should be avoided as this will reduce the strength and increase the risk of cracking. A stiff mix with too little water will be difficult to compact and finish. Placing and compacting of the concrete. Place the concrete until slightly higher than the top of the formwork. Compact the concrete to expel all air. Level the concrete to the top of the formwork using a straight edge, first with a chopping motion and then with a sawing motion. If you are casting in a continuous strip, the transverse groove joints should be installed now, before the concrete starts to stiffen. Do this by forming a straight groove between the longitudinal forms with the edge of a steel trowel or other flat steel blade at the predetermined spacings. Float the surface with a swirling motion of the wood float held in a flat position. It is essential that concrete be prevented from drying out. If there is any delay between placing and finishing of the concrete, it needs to be protected, especially in dry, windy weather. Cover the concrete to prevent surface evaporation while you wait for it to stiffen sufficiently to permit final finishing. Finishing. Remove the plastic when the surface has stiffened but still has moisture at the surface. Use a swirling motion of the wood float held in a flat position to create a smooth paste. A number of finishes can now be created. For example, use a stiff bristled broom, drag or zigzag it across the surface, sprinkle small stones, or place bottle tops and compact them into the surface with a chopping motion of the wood float. Other creative ideas are left to your limitless imagination. Use the edging tool to form a neat, rounded edge against the forms and on either side of the grooved joints. Take note that dry cement should not be added to the surface as a dryer to assist with achieving a smoother finish. Dry pigments should not be added to the surface of the concrete unless they are formulated for dry shake applications. These practices will result in craze cracking, delamination, and dusting. Protection and curing. Follow the curing process described on the back of the PPC SureBuild bag. For the concrete to develop strength, it should be kept damp for an adequate period after placing. Curing should be continued for at least 7 days in warm weather and 10 days in cold weather. The recommended curing procedure is to cover the work with plastic sheeting as soon as possible after the surface texturing is complete. The plastic sheeting must be kept in place, weighting it down along the edges with stones, planks, pipes or gum poles to stop the wind getting underneath the sheeting. These instructions are only a guide. There are many other alternative methods to laying a concrete pathway. Don't forget to always wear protective clothing while working with cement.